Welcome to Army Fitness. My name is Dwayne and I'm your host. Today I'm interviewing Ross and Kingsley Holgate, famous explorers. We're going to be speaking about the Kingsley Holgate Foundation and how they give back to our beautiful continent. I'm going to be asking Ross about his first adventure with his father and how that landed up nearly killing both of them. We're going to be speaking about them circumnavigating the globe, finding the center of Africa and encountering Somali pirates. We're also going to be speaking to Ross about how he stays fit and healthy during his travel. This is a must listen or watch podcast for anybody interested in adventure and travel. Sit back, listen up, and get involved. Okay guys, well welcome. Thanks for coming. I think we want to jump straight into the lockdown because you were just telling me off camera now a little bit about it, and I think that's super fascinating what you've been up to. So give us a little bit about what you've been doing, who have you been helping, where have you been?
Yeah, Ross, do you want to kick off?
I think we're very fortunate to live where we live, just outside of Sinkwazi. So we're on some big acreage, so we've been allowed to ride horses and motorbikes and swim and the likes of, which is, it kind of makes you think afterwards where you want to take your life, and especially for those that are starting off that want to buy their first property and start having kids. You know, that sort of typical South African novelty of trying to find somewhere in a gated estate that is safe. I think that mentality is going to change after lockdown, because what you really want is just a little piece of Africa where your kids can run around and you can do stuff if you ever have to be locked down again. So definitely it's changed our sort of mentality in terms of lifestyle and where you want to live, is a big open area that you can run around. If you can ride motorbikes, horses, swim, and just carry on with your life and keep your sanity, as opposed to sort of being locked up.
Ross, I'm fascinated to know how you keep fit in the bush. You know, like we're all struggling to keep fit in COVID, with COVID here in lockdown, without any equipment, without much imagination. But I mean, how are you keeping so fit and strong, and when you're traveling out here in these remote places?
But no, it's not easy. But what is nice is that on a lot of expeditions, you're spending a lot of time behind the steering wheel of a Land Rover. You don't even have, if you get one of those watches that tells you how many steps you do, you actually be shocked that sometimes you step out and you've done 60 the whole day because you've been sitting behind the car. You know, also we're a very close team. So you're always together around the fire. So exercise is another way of kind of just having a little bit of your own time, of, let's call it me time, where you can go off, you can go for a bit of a run. Or if you want to do anything a little bit more physical around camp, if you can't go out because of wildlife or because of security or stuff like that, the nice thing is there's always jerry cans, fuel jerry cans. So I always try and make sure that the jerry cans are full so that there's always weight. Carry a bar around.
What kind of bar?
Just
The real bar, not
like a proper bar.
Also the other bar.
No, well, a very simple version of it. And then one or two weights if possible. So try and use, my bench is the bedroll. So basically that's your mattress and your sleeping bag. It's all kind of rolled tightly together in just one. That's the actual bench. But the humor it creates as well from the locals, especially when you have the Turkana or the Samburu or the likes all coming down to pier and watch this trying to do some gym training, it's a wonderful interaction, to be totally honest. So there's the one side of trying to stay fit, using jerry cans or whatever you can, taking the winch cable out and holding it as tight as you re-winch it in. You improvise. I even got a pull down which attaches to where the tow bar goes, retractable tow bar. You take it off and this little L bracket fits in. Now you've got a bit of a pull down. So there's different ways of making a plan. The thing is, you just have to be diligent, like any exercise, and do it as much as you can. But once again, it's a bit like the humanitarian side. There's always that reward, and if you get a few locals around that find this absolutely amazing, to start training with them opens up a whole new window. They try, there's some strong African guys out there, to be totally honest. So, but it's amazing. Fitness is everywhere. In the smallest little town, you can find a gym. And if you do have the time to go and visit, and I try and make an effort in nearly every sort of African town or city that I've been to, I manage to find a gym. As I arrive, the first thing I do is ask, is there a local place? And this is not an incredible establishment like yours. This is the most basic, where it's tins that are filled with concrete. The bars are actually wooden. but guys are in there doing their absolute best. And the friendships that you make, the advice that you get, the security situation update that you get from these people is unbelievable, because it's people from all walks of life. So it's a wonderful way of getting in there and saying, hey, listen, we're planning to do this trip up to Somalia. Can you give us a bit of advice? And you sit in the gym the next minute, you're having a meal with the guys at the restaurant. It's a wonderful way of interacting. It's going to be very different now. We're such social people out of COVID. Everything is going to change. The way we travel, the way we distribute our humanitarian items, that African handshake, that hard, firm handshake that means so much when you look into someone's eyes and I'm here, how are you? We respect everything. How are we going to manage with that? I'm not 100% sure as yet. We can't wait to get out there and just take it one step at a time. But we will get out there.
Brilliant.
But I'm sure Ross is responsible for a number of very sore muscles when he leaves camp.
Yes.
And you've got these Maasai guys,
trying to keep up with Ross.
6'6", thin, who drink blood and only have protein and everything, and they grab these weights. As Ross said, it creates a huge amount of competition and humor around the camp.
I mean, you guys are big. I wanted to just ask you on an adventure thing, because I was mentioning the first time I actually knew who you were, I was watching a rugby game, and one of the ads came up where the landy was like sliding halfway through the mud. I think it was a Captain Morgan advert, right, if I'm not wrong. But then I was like, okay, I know who this guy is now. But that just brings me to the question, like, what's the most, I would say, sketchy situation where your vehicle's been stuck and you thought, I don't know how we're going to get out of here. We don't even know where we are. We've got no cell phones maybe working. Do you have any of those? You must have some story like that.
We decided, or it wasn't really we, I think it was more sort of father to son, we should spend once a year doing a bonding exercise. You're going to bugger off to boarding school, there's going to be a stage once when we sort of part our ways, everything, but let's get to know each other and do a bit of a bonding experience. So every year I was whipped off to some strange place, but unfortunately in those days our lovely green passport was not widely accepted. You were very limited to where you could go into Africa. So initially it was sort of more like the Berg and Southern Africa. Then it kind of became Botswana as it opened up. And then one year, I think I was about 14, Dad said to me, listen, I've seen these drawings of a contraption which is called a land yacht. And they use it in France and in the UK. Because the tidal difference is so extreme, at low tide, the beaches, you have like 3 kilometers of very, very flat, hard, wet sand. And that allows you to sail these land yachts, which is a 3-wheeler, little metal contraption with, I don't know if you've sailed Hobie cats?
No.
Catamarans. It's sort of a sail with a boom, and you have these 2 seats at the back, and you just sit in them and you steer with your feet using the front wheel as a sort of steerage. Now, your butt is only about 7 to 10 inches off the ground, so speed is accelerated quite dramatically because of your low center of gravity. So we got these things designed, got the masts off a Hobie cat, got the sails made here in Durban by North Sails, stuck them in the back of the Land Rover, and we drove to Botswana, to the Magadi salt pans, the largest salt pans in the world. I think it's 32,000 square kilometers of salt pans. And we were going to go on a father and son sailing experience on this moon mantle. It is so flat that it actually starts to hang off at sunset. Jeez. Why you kind of like, this is unbelievable. So we got there and the wind was blowing. You couldn't have asked for a better arrival. None of us had sailed these things before. It took us a few hours to kind of bolt them all together. We jumped on and off we sailed like kids. I was a kid. Backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards. 14.
14.
Okay, came back and everything like that. We just lay the yachts over onto their side, took our mattress and our sleeping bags and laid in the sail, a bit like a hammock. There was no firewood, so we just used dry zebra and wildebeest dung just to cook a few baked beans and the likes of, and the next morning we set off. We took our spare mast with a school rugby jersey and attached it to the vehicle, so a bit of a flag so we could see where the vehicle was, and off we went to go and sail the largest salt pans, and we sailed. And also what we failed to work out was that it was suicide season. Okay, so the wind blows, but just because of the extreme heat, the bounce back. So it's around about 47, 49, 50 degrees. And there isn't a single tree and there's no shade. First day was beautiful. We sailed backwards, forwards, tacking, no GPS, no map, no nothing. Slept the night.
Were you both on the same
Two yachts.
craft? Two
yachts. Next day we sail again, whole day. Backwards, forwards, going, laughing, sharing, hugging. Best father and son bonding experience ever. Next day we sail again. Now 3 days of this. All we had was a 25-litre thing of water, a Oros, was it Oros? A few tins of baked beans, a few tins of bully beef, and we would sort of discuss life. And obviously the big question was, what are you going to do with your future, my boy? Were you going to? And I had absolutely no idea. I thought just to finish this adventure would be a big enough of a life achievement. Anyway, the next day we woke up, there was a little bit of a puff of wind, and off we sailed, and then there was nothing. And what we did is we just roped in the sail, and all you had to do was just push the back of the boom, and the wind was enough to continue the movement of the yacht, but not enough for you to climb on. And we carried on going and going and going. And then we realized, then the wind stopped completely. So now we're on day 1, 2, 3, 4, day 5. Water, half a litre. Okay? What we failed to remember was the fact that we had not been going in a straight line, we had been tacking the whole time. So when we decided to turn around and go back and try and find our vehicle and get back to supplies, the only way we had, no, as I say, no map, no GPS, no compass, no nothing, was to follow our tracks. But all you were doing was this. Because we had just been having so much fun. And we walked, and I'll never ever forget that sound that your boots make when you break the salt crust and then you go into a slightly wetter depression. So you have to pull your leg out. Hour after hour after hour. Eventually we realized we couldn't do that. After a day of that, that was enough. Put the yachts together, used them for shade, and then we walked at night. And we walked at night, and we walked at night.
Having left the yachts.
Water's finished now.
Water's finished, yachts have been left. Okay.
Day 6, day 7?
Day 7 now. Probably 2 days of snow. You know that heat, it's amazing how you think you can go without water. It is. Eventually now, Kingsley's everything is just a mirage. You think that you can see a vehicle or a house or something, and everything is just floating in front of you.
Have you still got tracks that you're following?
We're now following the edge of the pan.
Found the edge of the pan.
Now, which had to take us theoretically back to the vehicle.
But the night before, we were walking in reasonably full moon. At about midnight, a cloud came over and we walked straight past our vehicles.
No way.
Straight past our vehicles.
Probably by about 20, 30 meters.
Pitch black. So Kingsley's now just hallucinating, just falling over, vomiting this green bile. In the distance, I see this, what I thought was a vehicle. So I just, as fast as I can, I go there, leave Kingsley, and I just run, and I run. As I get closer, the vehicle moves off. Stop. Then the vehicle stops as well. Sprint towards it. Finally, I get there. The people, I'm seeing this apparition, just
swollen lips, nose,
just
like
escape. They just say, not a chance. This is the devil has come to them.
Was it a vehicle?
It was a vehicle. It was loading these slate stones off the edge of the pan for building materials. And eventually they came back and they spoke Setswana, and we didn't speak any of the language. They spoke no English, and I'm trying to explain what our situation is and the fact that my father's out there in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know where he was now.
No ways.
So obviously their eyesight completely different. They're so used to those conditions. They loaded me on the back of the truck, threw me in the back of the truck, drove to where Kingsley was, grabbed him, threw him in the back of the truck, and took us back to a local village.
Jeez.
Finally, about 6 hours later, a gentleman arrives who's the local school teacher and the only one, that can speak English. He gets out this enamel bath. Pours water and the both of us climb in this enamel bath. Quite a sight. Gives us a 2 litre of Sprite or something like that. We quench our thirst. And he said, what happened? So we tell him the whole story. I've told you, and he looks at us and says, I know, you guys are lost aviators. He thought we had a plane accident. So anyway, we promised you we thought we died. And to cut a long story short, that was the first of the sagas. We then took a couple of days to recover. We went back to get the land yachts. We got the vehicle so stuck in the pans because we were too lazy to go and walk and pull. And the high lift jack slipped, knocked me out completely unconscious. And it took us another 2 or 3 days to get the vehicle out. And at the age of 14, I jumped in the back of that Land Rover, no license, and I drove all the way back to Sinkwazi, one shot. And that was the start of our sort of family. So I think it was a very... At Kearsley.
They couldn't have believed you when you told them the story.
Well, nor could Ross's mother.
Nor could my mom, to be totally honest. So that was the foundation of the adventures, to be totally honest. I think they've got easier, but we have managed to, more recently, funnily enough, have a few dire ones. We did an incredible series of expeditions which we called the Seven Poles, which was to discover the most southern, the most eastern, the most western, the most northern, the lowest and the highest and the center point of the African continent. Okay, absolutely. Well, it was just a phenomenal mission. And we launched an expedition to try and discover the heart of Africa, Africa's center point. Every continent, even Antarctica, has a center point that has been marked, and Africa doesn't. So the two of us went off to go and do an expedition called Heart of Africa.
So this is different to the Seven Poles?
This is what it was one of, which was...
The seven poles, what our research was sort of seen as these 7 geographic points in Africa that one should try and do in one's life. Of course, was the obvious one, Cape Agulhas, the very southerly tip of South Africa where the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic meet. Of course, the most westerly point in Senegal, the most northerly point in Tunisia. I'll come back to the most easterly point in a moment. Then, of course, the highest point, namely Kilimanjaro, the highest freestanding mountain in the world, which you've all done several times. The lowest point, namely Lake Assal in Djibouti, which is below sea level. And then, of course, the remaining one, the very center of the continent. And so we took off by Land Rover, left South Africa, all the way up through Zambia. Amazing journey. Some blokes on mountain bikes. Huge fitness factor along the way by a team led by a fellow called Mike Nixon, who's done the 7 summits of the world, climbed Everest twice, cycled every Cape Epic, joining us with a team and riding as we went. And then, of course, crossing Angola. Sure. The difficulty in crossing between Brazzaville and Kinshasa, or Kinshasa and Brazzaville, you wouldn't believe that you had these 2 big international cities, Kinshasa, the largest French-speaking city after Paris, and then 5 or 7 kilometers of the great Congo River, and on the other side, Brazzaville, and there's no bridge. There isn't even a workable ferry to take the vehicles. That was an exercise in AK-47s being pushed up our noses and all sorts of carryings on, but we got across. And finally got into to make it easy for you to understand, the geographic center of the African continent sits within 200,000 square kilometers of equatorial rainforest just south of the Central African Republic in the Republic of Congo. Now to get there started off relatively easy. We'd hired some 14 pygmies who knew the forest like the back of their hands, but had never been this deep into the forest. Ross was doing the navigation.
But it really sets the tone. I mean, these people are genuinely the forest dwellers, and they are still pygmies out there. Unbelievable.
But I was just saying, when you said that, I was like, did you come across people that had probably never seen people before, definitely never seen white people before?
Loads.
Yeah.
Definitely not having seen white people before. And
especially not that look like.
Yeah. And I'll fast forward the journey as it became unbelievably tough. You know, swamp water up to our necks, dragging ourselves through mud and slush day after day. Mark.
Were you trekking now?
Trekking.
And did you have like what did you have to put there? Like, how do you mark the area?
We carried a beacon made by Barrows here in Durban, carried by the pygmies, which fitted into sections.
It was just pieces of metal that all screwed in together.
Wow.
Had a flag on top of it.
And I'll fast forward. Very tough, too tough for me. Eventually got to a place, everybody cut and ripped to pieces, everybody covered in blood. Mark Nixon, probably one of the toughest, the mountain climber, probably had well over 100 bee stings by that time. Some of them down his throat, his face had swollen to double the size. He was on an EpiPen. And we realized that should one of us get hurt, which is quite possible, because as the pygmies walk before you slashing, at the undergrowth. They slash at their height, which is half a meter off the ground because they like cut low. And you've got these sharp little sticks of hardwood that when they cut, they like a spear tip. And you keep on tripping over vines and what have you, and you fall, knowing that one of them can pierce your eye, pierce your lung. And if you get into trouble there, there's absolutely no way you can get out. So that's...
They're like 40, 45 kilograms.
Tiny people.
Tiny people that just float over this vegetation. And you like 100 and something, and you disappear. Seriously, you disappear. So just to give you an example, on the first 3 days, we did 630 meters in 3 days.
Jeez.
It was just a wall of equatorial forest, and we managed to make one satellite telephone call in 17 days. And there was only a little bit of clearing that we could. It was unbelievable.
So I was up against a tree and quite prepared to die there. This beautiful old 1,000-year-old hardwood tree, this spreading canopy of branches, before the Chinese cut it down. So that's quite relaxed to die here. And Ross came to me and said, can you do it? There's 780 meters, I think it was, left to go. We always carry an old talking stick with us, an old Zulu stick that we used to tell stories around a campfire with. Held out the stick and gave me a pull, and I got up onto my feet. I don't remember getting to the destination. But we got to the very center of the African continent, screwed that beacon into the old root of a tree with the right coordinates on the beacon and a little outline of an African elephant, because the real purpose of our journey was twofold. One was to discover the very center of the African continent. The other was to try and do something about the fact that an elephant gets killed every 15 minutes of the day with by poachers' guns. So when we survived this exercise, as sick, tired as we were, scarred, septic legs, you name it, we went out school to school to school doing elephant education, and then eventually made our way back. I had to be casevaced out to get medical help. Everybody made it. It was a great adventure, one of the many, and of course it added to those 7 iconic points on the African continent.
Jeez, I promise you, I feel like standing up and giving you a clap. It's like amazing. It really is. What an achievement.
Or just realize how foolish we are, man.
Well, no, it's incredible. What an incredible
it was a
thing
real
to do.
old school expedition.
Yeah.
It's not that you can't do that every time. It's just not possible. But to be able to have the privilege to do that, where you want to lay claim to anything, we weren't. We were just doing stuff for ourselves and for the people, of the Congo. But we worked hard and we were rewarded. So
one of the team had played excellent rugby here in South Africa, went on to go as a young man to play club rugby in France. And he was the size of a baobab, tough as nails, huge legs. Well, believe me, if you walked behind him in those muddy swamps and you fell into one of his divots where he'd gone down and pulled his boot out and you went down, it could take you half an hour to get out of there. So in the end, there was lots of humor. As sore and tired as we were at the end, we found some cheap Cameroonian gin and we danced in the mud.
Awesome.
Celebrating the completion of another one of those great journeys. They continue. More recently, and I said we'd come back to reaching the most easterly point of this continent. When we tracked the outline of Africa once, 449 days in Land Rovers, all the way from Cape Point, all the way. Imagine the outside edge of Africa. Imagine the ongoing beaches that you probably walk on here in Belita and Salt Rock. But imagine doing that for 449 days, tracking the outline of Africa. But at that time, we were unable, because of the danger involved of getting to the most easterly point, which is close to the very tip of the Horn of Africa in dangerous Somalia. Such was the civil war there at the time that we couldn't. So to lay claim to those 7 points, and having got to the geographic center, Ross and myself and a few others went off again, traveling mostly at night, after having reached the ancient walled city of Harar in Ethiopia, and down to Somaliland. 20 guys with AK-47s, 2 light machine guns, and we laid claim to the most easterly point of the African continent, which is actually about 115 kilometers south of what you see as the Horn of Africa on the map of Africa. A little place called Ras Hafun, which, as it happened, also turned out to be a pirate stronghold. We nearly lost our lives. People threatened to cut our heads off. But on every expedition, we carry a scroll of peace and goodwill, a book that canvas and leather bound. Every single journey we do, and we've got more than 30 of these piled up at Africa House just up the coast from here. And the opening pages of that book is us as a family sitting with Nelson Mandela. And it's a scroll of peace and goodwill, and as we travel, everybody, wow, great on the malaria work, and nice to meet you guys, and lovely messages from village chiefs and ambassadors, and you name it, district officers, and even president. That's what saved our lives. We took out that book. There was messages written by Somali headmen and chiefs and everything of how on our route, even with the machine guns and the AK-47s, we'd been able to give out malaria nets, do right to sight, water purification. Do you remember we had those boxes, those units? Each unit, little water purifier, gives you 30,000 litres of community water for a little clinic or a homestead or a village. Hugely appreciated.
So did they take you in as prisoners, or?
Yes. And when they saw...
You see, the problem is that it was our fault as well, to be totally honest. We knew that it wasn't an achievable exercise. To have gone in and tried to get permission and say, please, can we? The Somalian government would have said no. So we managed to, through a private security type of company, smuggle in and do it at night and then try and get out as quickly as possible. But social media is a terrible thing.
They put a picture up of this ugly bugger.
A few people managed to take some pictures somewhere along the route, and they posted it up. So on our return visit, we got caught at a roadblock and then thrown away.
I was accused of being the chief of a South African Al-Shabaab spy group. And they said if we weren't Al-Shabaab spies, then surely we were South African geologists come to steal the riches of the country. But as I said, we managed to dispel that with our peace and goodwill and by doing good stuff, and that Mandela scroll, and managed to live the tale. And so we were able to complete those 7 iconic points of Africa. More recently, Ross has just got back from another beauty of an expedition, from the mouth of the Zambezi to the mouth of the Congo by road. Vehicles standing outside.
Tell us about that. That sounds awesome.
You sort of look for these excuses sometimes to do things, and every time we've been through the Congo, we've either sort of travelled up the eastern side or up the western side. There are no sort of interior roads going north and south because of first the Congo River and then all its tributaries as well, the Luapula and the likes of. So most of the Congo is this equatorial belt, but there is one road that runs from Kinshasa, the capital, to Lubumbashi, close to the Zambian border, pretty much on an east to west or west to east direction. And it's known as the most dangerous road. It's the sort of old days of the Camel Trophy and the likes of. It's the biggest challenge for man and machine to try and achieve. It's that typical kind of winching, meter by meter, building your own roads where there aren't even roads, actually driving through villages, just creating a path, no fuel, no supplies, no food, so it just became one of those, and I think in today's time, probably the most epic 4-wheel drive experience that you could do. And then thrown into that is the military side, is the corruption of, unfortunately, of some areas of the Congo. Those guys haven't been out. They've never traveled to a city ever in their life. They haven't been paid for 2-3 years, but they've been left with an AK-47. So the only way that you can, get some type of funding is extraction. And there's no tourists. So it's anyone that passes by, whether it's a guy that's taking tomatoes to the village or guys that's smuggling fuel on the back of a bicycle. Just to tell you that story, you talk about fitness, endurance, like no other. We came across these petrol and diesel smugglers bringing coming out of Angola to support the piki trade, these little kind of Chinese motorbikes. Each guy would carry 260 liters of petrol or diesel on a little Indian single-geared bicycle. Each one of those journeys one way is 13 days. And they do 20-hour shifts. 4-hour, stop on the side of the road, no tent, one little blanket, try and get a little bit of food on the way, and that's it. And they get back, have one night at home, turn around and go back again.
Wow.
It's just unbelievable. And there you come past in your fancy Land Rover, desperately trying to find the route and the track and hoping for them to push. But at the same time, what do? They're your source of diesel. Mm-hmm. So you purchase the entire load. The smile on that guy's face. He's put the price up by only 10 cents or so, but his journey's now cut in half and he can go back. So yeah, no, it was an incredible challenge. But we were happy to be home after that. It's a once-off thing. I wouldn't really recommend it to too many people.
Because physical or dangerous?
Yeah, physical and the danger side. There's
like, what do the guys charge? Like, let's say the corruption there, where they stop you at the AK, and how much would they ask for?
Well, that's always the problem with Africa, to be totally honest, is that you're going to take an advantage of. The guy that comes in a somewhat fancy four-wheel drive looks like he's got a bit of bucks. He probably has. So the bureaucrat or the policeman or the customs officer or whoever is going to try and extract. It's just the African way. The problem, and I think why most people do pay the bribe, is that everyone's short of time. You get into a bit of a panic. I need to get to that place by the end of the day. The reality is, if you go at the same speed of Africa, the same pace of Africa, where they say the Swiss might have developed the clock, but it's Africa that owns the time. If you travel at that same price, you can sit and just negotiate and sit there and say, I'm not going to pay. And it's actually the greatest reward at the end of the day when the guy gets completely tired of you and says, bugger off, carry on with your journey, opens the gate, opens the boom, whatever, and off you go, without having to pay something. But it's only because you had the time. He wants to sit there and negotiate and barter. You might give him a cap or a magazine or something that you've got lying there. But to start handing over the $100 bills, it's not even a doable thing.
No.
And you're making it more and more difficult for people that follow you. So try not, but you've got to have the time on your side.
During this COVID time, if we call it that, people get tense. Are their jobs going to be safe? What about incomes, families, everything? It's a really difficult time. And of course, it's difficult politically. One can find fault in every direction and everything. And maybe this is a good time to remind ourselves of how fortunate we are to live in this cradle of all humankind, Mama Africa. You just think of the beauty of this place and the opportunities. Just down the road is Indabas or Kasamba, the mighty Drakensberg, our game parks, this beautiful stretch of coastline that we live on. And I mean, further north, just the migration of over 1 million wildebeest, largest hoof migration in the world, not to mention our sardines as a migration. Just started, I believe, just down the south coast. Gazing into the soft brown eyes of a silverback mountain gorilla in the Virungas in Rwanda, or in the Bwindi impenetrable forests, the rivers like the Nile, the Zambezi, the Congo. Just this incredible beauty, culture, kaleidoscope of color and everything. And if we sort of chill and sort of just take it a bit easy, and maybe post-COVID we'll sort of sense there might be other values. But as Ross said earlier, go at the pace and rhythm of Africa, enjoy this continent for what it's worth, and try and make it work for you. Because we understand the hardships, the economic difficulties. We understand, one's children very often having to go overseas and find work. And we understand all those difficulties. We're not trying to sell Africa as a utopia. But man, there is no other continent quite like Mama Africa.
Totally agree. Speaking about customs and traditions, these kinds of things, you must have encountered some amazing people, amazing tribes that have invited you in and, asked you to try a little bit of Zulu beer or asked you to try a little bit of something. What's the most sort of interesting thing you have tried, or have you had? I mean, I've heard of you get these really interesting tribes that do these ayahuasca therapies and that way you can go and become a different spirit. I don't know if you've had any of these experiences.
No, that happens in West Africa, and it's not uncommon. But man, we do see some strength. How about the Mercy, for example? The Mercy girls, maybe you explained that one, Ross, there's been quite a bit of humour in that one, I've sensed. When they took a liking to old Mike Nixon, the cyclist.
It's some of the traditions and cultures of people are quite difficult. You have to go in with an open mind. You can't be critical and say this is disgusting. You have to go in with an open mind. We don't go in to change it. Whether it's female circumcision, there's some horrific stuff that goes on. But there's two tribes in southern Ethiopia. The first is the Hema people. And when a man comes of age, and before he can take a wife, he has to run across the back of 4 or 6 bulls.
Yeah, or sometimes even more.
Sometimes even more, depending on how wealthy. So he strips naked. From a standing position, he has to jump onto the first bull, and then run across, and then continue doing. If he falls, traditionally it's changed subsequently, he would be killed by his father out of embarrassment. Okay. While all this is going on,
how often do they fall?
We didn't
Probably
see
50% of the time, and sometimes it's 30. Maybe sometimes they have to bounce. Or 30 head of cattle, and the enclosure to keep those cattle is in fact other cattle.
And people just pushing them, so it's a moving target the whole time.
This poor guy, in his nudity, being laughed at by the girls and whatever, now he has to jump as if off a trampoline and bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce. And if he makes it, he is eligible for marriage. If he doesn't, these days, he's excommunicated into the bush, has to go and live like a hunter-gatherer for a year. Wow. But part of that occurrence, that ceremony, is one that as a Westerner and as a male you really have difficulty in handling, because prior to the jumping ceremony, the bull jumping it's called, the young ladies of the village line up, and they're beautiful. Little leather aprons and everything, beautiful ring, the hair, sort of Rasta style hair, rubbed with camel fat and red ochre and everything. And their suitors, their boyfriends, are each given a pile of thin whipping sticks. And these girls dance in front of the men and torment them. They even have little trumpets which they blow in the poor guy's ear. Really getting him very worked up. And then he has to whip them, but only across the back, opening up huge flesh wounds like mincemeat. And then they ask for more. And then they go off to the older woman.
You're not allowed to grimace. You're not allowed to show any pain. So yes, you were asking also about the hallucinogenic. The night before they really start on a bit of a kilirit, boil roots and everything like that, and get a bit high. And then there's a lot of song and dance.
Did you try it with them?
No. Otherwise I start beating my wife.
No, I'm just curious to see what Lizo's experience like.
No, and it's such a phenomenal thing to watch, because you have an elder who's let's call him the guard, that is always filtering around the whole time. The guy doesn't want to hit them. You can see on his face that he doesn't, but they torment him to such, they drive him crazy, and they'll whisper things into his ear and shout this at him and everything and embarrass him. And eventually, when they see that look in his face, they hand over the stick. And then I took a picture once and the blood just came straight across me. That's how severe the whipping is. This is not like, you bad girl. That might be a little bit exciting for you. This is opening up the flesh.
And then the older woman rubbed those wounds like a washboard. You imagine this poor girl's back. And then they rub that with animal fat and ash. And they want the wounds to heal in big rubbery scars. And that's a rite of passage. All these strange tribal cultures, also in the south of Ethiopia, on a place called the Omo Delta, where this river that flows through Ethiopia called the Omo meets in a delta with the largest desert lake in the world, namely the Jade Sea, or Lake Turkana, as it's now called, the old Lake Rudolph. And in this area, not far from where the Hammer people live, you have the Mercy. Now the Mercy give no mercy, although their name is spelled M-U-R-S-I. And the young girls of the Mercy tribe make a small hole when they're young below the bottom lip. This they keep on enlarging by putting different wedges of clay rings into the aperture, and it eventually ends up with this massive, you've seen pictures of it, of this clay disc, like the size of a side plate or a saucer. And their lip runs in it, much like, on the fan bolt of a motor car on a pulley, so that's the look. And these clay discs are decorated. A girl who can take that loop without the disc and put the loop over her head and back again is worth 50 head of cattle. So there are these strange beliefs. There's these people, which, by the way, you look at it and to us Westerners, it sort of disfigures their face a bit, but to the Mercy people, it's a thing of great beauty and joy. But what was even more difficult for us to understand is when the poor girl takes the lip plate out and this piece of lip wobbles around like that, and it's very dry and dusty, then she plonks it in her mouth, chews it a bit to moisten it up, and back goes in the lip plate. Well, can you imagine? We arrived at this very remote village of Mercy, and as it happened, we'd befriended the opposition tribe on the way, the Banner people. And on getting to the Mercy, we found that a Banner tribesman had been kidnapped by the Mercy, and the tribe that we'd seen, the Banner tribe on the way, had come to kill. There was going to be slaughter as we arrived. I whispered up to Ross, as we often do in Zulu, so no one could understand, do we have enough money to buy the biggest goat here? He nodded. We had it slaughtered. Everybody sat down. Soon it was cooked on the fire, and we had peace talks. And as it happened, the kidnapped Banner person was returned, and there was peace in the village. We were able to do malaria work. They danced and sang, and we had the most wonderful time. And into that mix, can you imagine arrives Mike Nixon on his mountain bike, who's been cycling the adventure. They'd never in their lives seen a pair of lycra tights before on a white person, never mind on anybody. Out came these young Banner ladies wearing their saucer-like lip plates. They stared down at his lycra, and one or two of them couldn't avoid a little bit of finger poking at the strange apparition of a cyclist in his lycra shorts. So yeah, different cultures, different times, always incredibly exciting. The Samburu, the Gabra, the Turkana, all the incredible tribes we come across. Even going to big cultural festivals at times, where the people put down their spears and their firearms and dance for peace. Stuff that you just feel so privileged to be able to see. Mama Africa.
And guys, when you're traveling around Africa, is there another country specifically that comes to mind? Or these are big human beings as well?
West Africa.
West Africa.
Small.
Ghana, Nigeria, and Senegal. It's a difference. When you talk about guys running, you talk about sort of South Africans. If you go and watch some South Africans playing football on a local field, you go to Senegal and watch.
Well, you remember my friend Chris, you met here from Senegal.
Just unbelievable human beings.
Yeah, huge guy. But I was thinking about you with bands. You should definitely travel with bands, because those are so versatile, and you could strap them on your back for squats, or with one band you can do everything, and even distributing those bands, because they're relatively cheap. So if you take like 6 or 7 bands, which would probably cost you like anywhere between 500 and 1,000 rand, depending on the make and the quality of the band, you could leave places with their own home gyms, and you can train every single muscle in the body with a band.
Otherwise you're just carrying dead weight.
Yeah, and that thing weighs nothing.
Band sounds right. You'd even fix springs with them and all sorts. Yeah, bands are great. I'd even try a few bands.
You should be, Kingsley. You should be.
You're your own band. But apart from that, we have the slogan, the two of us, is that we use adventure to save and improve lives. And so there's no point in sitting home feeling sorry for yourself and even just planning an expedition, as we actually had to get out there and keep doing some good. And I think Kingsley would like to chat about that a bit further.
Our initial disappointment with lockdown. We're supposed to be in North Africa now, taking a bit of a race in sort of new Land Rover Defenders all the way down through Africa, 20 countries, 20,000 kilometers, maps on the wall, reference books, ready to roll. And then, of course, came COVID-19 and lockdown. So you instantly had to get into a different mindset. And as Ross said earlier, our whole thing over most of Ross's life and my life has been about using our adventures to improve and save lives. So, adventure itself, it's a bit, I guess, like, your gym and your fitness and everything like it. There's a lot of energy around these things. A lot of energy, and energy around the Land Rovers and what tires and what kit and the heads and all that sort of positive stuff in terms of the lifestyle. Remember that we've been doing this for well over 30 years. More than 30 big expeditions, many of them world firsts, some of them quite dangerous, of course. But you're sticking to this thing of using adventure to improve and save lives. But getting back to lockdown, so what to do? And as Ross said, we're very lucky to live on this north coast here where there's been some opportunities that you don't feel too restricted over lockdown. But of course, we straight away got back to what we could do to help. And it became apparent very quickly that especially for people living way out in the rural areas, very remote areas, who haven't received food parcels as expected or promised, who've been bitten by the COVID-19 situation and no longer receiving bucks, from those working in the city. And then, of course, with a breakdown, complete collapse of tourism. So, and the closure of national parks and game reserves. So, with a delightful group of people, some are from this Belito area, Grant Folds, Joe Peterson, the rugby player, currently ex-Sharks guy playing rugby in America at the moment. Of course, he's back here because of COVID. A delightful bunch of sort of fellow adventurers all got together. But it started like this. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, they were in that northern Zululand area that you know so well. And an Induna from one of the communities came and spoke to him and said, are you aware of how we people living alongside game reserves and wilderness areas and wildlife areas are suffering? Gates are closed, no tourism, no works in the lodges are closed, and our food sources are starting to dry up and we're getting into serious trouble. There are some families that haven't been able to, because of circumstance, register for help. Some are not even on the grant. So instantly, this team of fellow conservationists and adventurers put some bucks on the table, and within 1 week, the first lorry load of nutritional porridge packs made at a maize mill in Potchefstroom. It's a product that's made for refugee camps, people in need all over Africa, very rich in vitamins and nutritional value, and it's a 5 kg bag that allows for 100 meals. Half a cup gives you enough to live on for a day. It's been hugely appreciated by those populations around these areas, especially around northern Zululand. Been working with Indunas, with the chiefs, the old traditional system, social distancing. You can't believe how delightful these old Zulu mamas are. They line up politely, each one stands a distance, give out face masks, everybody gets sanitized. So sick of the smell of sanitizing, aren't you?
Yeah.
These face masks. But anyway, they really toe the line beautifully, and so yeah. I think it's given us a chance to camp just quickly. Ross and I getting out into the field and sort of break away from it all. So selfishly, that's been very nice. But to date, we've been able to distribute more than 120,000 meals equivalent of this nutritional porridge. So great stuff. Some from Do More. The Do More Foundation have given us some, and then the others from this maize mill in Potchefstroom. So good stuff.
Staying up there now, did you stay in any of the parks, or were you involved with the guys? Because you mentioned the parks, and I believe that the wildlife have been amazing. Like the sightings have really been amazing. So we've been following some of these guys that have gone through and still filming the animals. Obviously you can't get a lot of visitors in, but do you think that there's more animals now coming out to the roads and coming out because there's less people, or do you think that doesn't really have an impact?
It's a world reimagined. You can't believe it. I mean, the lions walking in the road, elephants owning the place, walking through cap and everything. It's like before the time of human beings and man, and then you realize what we as a species have done to disrupt, the environment. And hopefully through this COVID pandemic, will we just get back as a human race to our normal practices? Or do you think, Ross, that there'll be more respect for our environment when we come out of this?
I think definitely there'll be a lot of respect, but I think what has also been amazing is how quick this transformation, this change, this environmental climatic change, how effective it has. You just have to look out on your ocean and it's unbelievable. The pollution, all that type of stuff, within just a month, how you can change this world. It's not about years and decades. If we could sort of just keep on over the next few years, have these mini lockdowns, what it actually can do and how it sustains the environment. And I suppose the important thing, and sorry to sort of harp on this kind of fact about trying to feed these wildlife communities, is that they are the custodians of these beautiful wildlife areas. And we are going through a bit of a time where there is incredible wildlife crime and these animals are being poached. So it's important that the custodians, the people that are living alongside these wildlife areas, are kept fed, because that was their income before. So by supporting them, they continue to support the wildlife and keeping that safe.
It's like Kingsley said, because I don't think a lot of the viewers will know what you meant when you said money coming from the cities, but it would be like a family member working in the city and then sending money back home.
Supporting up to 15 people.
Yeah,
in the local
just from one domestic salary. So yeah, that's a huge thing. And then obviously we see a lot of subsistence farming up there. And what's always amazing, also traveling up north, you find a soccer field almost anywhere you go, like a makeshift soccer field with sticks, and the guys are really active and fit. I mean, you'll know well how far some of the kids have to walk at a ridiculously young age as well to get to school, which is why we've got some of the best athletes in this country. Sure. And guys that we chatted to Barry Holland, the famous Comrades runner, the other day. And he was saying you get those odd freak athletes that will go and run a gold or a silver in Comrades first off,
Sure.
And that's what you're getting here because of those guys that are, sure. Running and walking that mileage every single day. But yeah, super interesting. I wanted to ask you guys about traveling in Africa. I'm also super passionate about our continent, and how easy is it for us to take up travel in Africa, cross borders, just drive everywhere, I mean, what sort of planning is involved when you do these trips? Are you planning for a month at a time, couple of weeks at a time? Tell us a little bit. Tell us why also you chose Land Rover. That's interesting. A lot of people are like, why Land Rover? Why didn't you go for a Cruiser or something along those lines? Like, wouldn't you have gotten more parts if it was a Toyota around anywhere around Africa?
Ross, maybe over to you on the Land Rover aspects.
Well, sorry, just on the adventure thing, I think it's really, really important that people know from the onset that you don't have to start your life of adventure, by getting it filmed on National Geographic or making a movie. Just jumping in a Land Rover and going away for the weekend and taking yourself out of a comfort zone and not staying at a lodge or a hotel or a resort and just actually camping and making do what's around you. And then maybe crossing into Mozambique, the next year, and taking that from Mozambique into Zimbabwe, and then sort of extending it. Small baby steps, because the reality is we are extremely fortunate. We know that. We appreciate it. But that said, adventure and travel in Africa is flippin' expensive. The more adventurous you want to be, and the harder you want to afkak, the more it's going to cost you. If you want to climb mountains, it's going to cost you more than going to a Pinde Lodge. So it is quite surprising that this world of adventure, and especially African travel, has become ridiculously expensive. When we go out and probably spend 3 to 6 months, we're lucky if we will have a night's accommodation in brick and mortar once a month, and generally that will be sponsored. But that said, especially over this lockdown period, the biggest thing we crave for is to be able to find a free camp, not because you don't actually want to pay, just because you found your own little piece of Africa on the side of the road that has a lovely tree that the sun's going to set behind, nice clearing, not too many thorns to puncture your mattress, and the likes of firewood that's accessible to build a bit of a fire and keep some of the wildlife away. And just to be able to sit again, socialize, all right, even though you might have some social distancing around that fire, and just to be able to tell stories. That's our biggest thing, and that's the biggest thing about travel and adventure. And as you get into Africa, at the end of the day, it's sharing those stories around a fire. We used to run a commercial safari company in Kenya. It's kind of like how we started. And we had no bucks. Seriously, we were the bottom of the feeding chain. And we had 2 old Land Rovers, 2 old Series 2s, completely open, and we had a tracker seat on the front. We had a Maasai guide with his lion spear and his red shuka and the red ochre and everything over him. And our clients, we were in a very remote area, so the clients had to fly in to get to this area to see wildlife. Everyone else had other forms of 4-wheel drives, and the entire plane would migrate towards that Land Rover, because that's what epitomizes travel in Africa. It's the old Land Rovers, from out of Africa days, from discovering new places. It's all about Land Rover. And we're all about heritage, and that's why Land Rover as a brand fits into what we want to do. We pioneer. We also want to do good, and that's what that brand has all been about. They've supported all our humanitarian initiatives. The only vehicle manufacturing brand that actually puts their money where their mouth is. They say, listen, well, we've got a great vehicle that can go anywhere. But if you're going to go anywhere, go and do some good with it. And that's why the association is so strong.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and as Ross says, it's this association not just with the vehicle, but what the vehicle, in this case Land Rover, is able to provide. So when they help fund our expeditions, there's also a budget for the humanitarian side, and that to us is the very soul of what we do, is having adventure, as I said, the slogan, using adventure to improve and save lives. And so our 3 projects that we really adhere to very strongly in terms of the humanitarian side is Right to Sight. It's called Mashozi's Right to Sight, named after my late wife, Ross's mum. Mashozi was her Zulu name. And that's a beautiful project whereby we distribute simple reading glasses, something that you would go into your local pharmacy and just pick off the shelf, squint into the mirror, work out your strength, and on you'd go, and think nothing more of it. Cost you, what, in the pharmacy, probably 100 odd rands. But in those deep rural areas, when you can change the quality of a person's life by a simple pair of glasses, a person can do beadwork again and get their livelihood back, weave a mat, put a bit of bait on a hook, fix a fishing net. A cobbler can get back to work mending shoes. Something we take so for granted, and we only scratch the surface. We've done 264,000 pairs of Right to Sight to date, spectacles. The other one is something that's...
But sorry to interrupt, it's instant gratification for that individual.
Yeah.
Life-changing, instant gratification. You've gone in and you've changed that person's life. We recently were very, very fortunate to be we supported Doctors for Life, Mercy Air, and some ophthalmologists in the Zambezi Delta, 19,000 square kilometers of some of the harshest places in Africa. Highest concentration of river blindness, probably one of the highest concentrations of malaria, crocodile attacks, the likes of it is hard territory. And we loaded some military-style operating theatres that they'd used in Iraq, loaded them into the Land Rover, and we drove to the Zambezi with some boats, and we drove there and launched the boats and everything, and then went and found potential people that needed cataract operations or who had some form of blindness. Brought them back, and we did 375 cataract operations, of which I think there were 3 boys, I stand to be corrected, who had never
two little
ever
brothers
seen in their lives before. And Kingsley asked the guy, what is your biggest dream? He said, well, my biggest dream is to go and play soccer. You know, when I'm walking backwards and forwards between the village, I hear these people having so much fun and everything. That's what I want to do. He walked out of that operating theatre and he could see 100%.
Jeez.
We rushed up and bought a few
soccer balls and stuff like that.
It was just fantastic. And the little brother, I remember, his dream, his favourite food or drink was coconut milk. And his dream was to be able to get back to his village and climb a coconut palm and get to his own coconut. And for the parents, you know, imagine what it was being like for them to have to watch their little boys every single move, surrounded by water, island-type living, dangerous, hippos, crocs and such like. To have to watch them every moment of the day and now have the freedom of sight.
Life expectancy,
But
37 years old.
Are they suffering more than like your average person in South Africa? Because I'm just asking, because I watched one of your, there was a YouTube documentary and there was this African guy somewhere, I don't even know where it was, literally pouring sand in his eye as a ritual. And I'm like, okay, well, that can't be good for your eyes.
No.
So, I mean, is this the reason, or are we just talking, obviously, they don't have the help, and it's if there's the percentage is 15% here, it's going to be 15% there as well.
It really is a lack of facilities. I mean, we'll get to remote hospitals or clinics where they don't have an aspirin. We'll come to villages where it's like a thud to the heart, seeing a mum screaming, a baby about to go into a coma from malaria, and it's more than 100 kilometers away by dugout canoe to the closest clinic. So it's all about the remoteness and the fact that the places we reach, and that's the nature of an expedition, is it allows you to go to very remote, tough to get to places. Talking about malaria now, when we started this program, Ross, a child was dying for every 30 seconds of the day and night around the clock. A child now dies every 2 minutes. It's
still horrific.
It's still
big
horrific.
change.
Yeah,
and you know, during this COVID time, where the world is understandably so wrapped up in this pandemic, malaria is killing more people.
Yeah.
So yes, the second, we mentioned the right to sight, the spectacles. We mentioned talking now about the malaria. Of course, it's not just about the distribution of a life-saving mosquito net. It's hugely about education, colouring in books, getting the kids involved in what we call malaria art, kicking a soccer ball around. You talked about fitness, the importance of these little events to throw in a game of soccer, man of the match, winning a bicycle, getting a certificate. So you're also using sport and fitness, you know, little marathon races around the village, bicycle races on those old-fashioned made-in-India bikes. So, and
see, especially when you're only distributing, like Kingsley says, when you're only distributing a product to a very small demographic, the rest of the African community says, hey, well, what about us? And that's what's so lovely about using the energies of other and the energy of exercise and that magic game of soccer or football or whatever you want to call it. Just gets that entire community together. Okay, guys get a trophy, they get balls, they get boots, they get at the end of it. Now they aspire, okay, to want to know more about malaria, which opens up this little platform to educate more people on how to look after yourself. Listen, go down to the nearest place when you got some money, buy your own mosquito net, look after it. And that's going to save your life. So a wonderful energy around.
And what we should include is that the energy of doing that work in terms of the education and the mosquito nets then led to something that's become huge and very successful. We took a gang of people out into the bush, one of whom was the founder of Nando's, Robbie Brosen. And we went to a few maternity clinics and to schools, and we did our work in terms of education and malaria nets. And I remember the next morning standing in a lagoon north of Ilha de Mozambique, up the coast of Mozambique, brushing our teeth in the lagoon, like having sort of slept in small pop-up tents under the stars. And Robbie Brosen turning to me and said, you know, something clicked yesterday. I know that I'll never receive a Facebook mention. No one will ever remember my name. I won't be seen on television. I won't appear on Facebook or anything. But I know the simple gesture of saving someone's life and giving them a mosquito net that they don't have to die from the blood-sucking bite of the Anopheles mosquito has touched my life. And what I would like to share with you, Robbie and the Nando's team, joined by others, went forward to start Goodbye Malaria in southern Mozambique, a spraying program that I think employs about 2,000 people, of which more than half are ladies, all dressed up in their khaki kit and the visors and the spray. Go back to that old-fashioned, not DDT, safe chemicals, and doing indoor residual spraying, keeping communities safe from malaria. So, start small. A few mozzie nets, Ross and myself and us as a family, the Holgate family, started doing this malaria work. We had no support. We had no financial support. We just had this overriding thing that we needed to use our adventures to improve lives. And that's how the malaria thing started, and this is where it's taken us.
It has completely changed the dynamics of adventure and travel, because it's actually made it harder. You've got to raise more money for the sort of humanitarian stuff. You've got to carry more supplies and everything to do the work. But it gives you a window of opportunity and insight into not just Africa but the world when you do a journey that has purpose. And you go out and you give, it's not you paying this rite of passage, but people can truly see that you're there on a different level, and that just opens up a completely new window of adventure and experience. People invite you into their homes. Please stay here the night, share the food. We've got a cultural ceremony tomorrow that no one's ever witnessed. Actually you can take a photograph if you want. Now, those type of opportunities that would never ever normally avail themselves to you. And it's not because that's not why we did it and why we did, but it was amazing as it unfolded. That was the sort of, that's your thank you. And that sort of changed it completely.
The humanitarian side of your guys' work is humbling. Like, for us sitting here listening to it, it really is. It's like, wait, what are you doing with your life? You've got to also give back. I mean, it's a massive thing about who we are as humans, and I think everyone should get involved on one level or another to change someone's life. Thanks for sharing that, and I think people should go check out your foundation, reach out and see how they can get involved. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Great pleasure.
It's been awesome. I'd love to hang out again and get some more campfire stories. Maybe this time we'll use this stick if I'm invited.
No, absolutely.
But thanks so much, Ross, Kingsley. It's been a real honor and privilege having you guys in today.
Lovely chatting here. Lovely
thanks,
being able to spend some time with you.
And good luck with the way forward. It's a new world for all of us.
Yeah, we'll be training in bubbles here, and we'll probably have to get some sort of chamber, one-on-one training. Who knows?
It'll still be exciting.
It will be, definitely.
I mean, the word that's being bandied around is probably quite apt. It's going to be a world reimagined.
Exactly.
And everything. So good luck with everything, and thank you. Thank you for your hospitality. Thanks very much.
We'll see you on an adventure.
Well, I have to. I'm committing to everything. So now I'm committed to a comrades. I've committed to learn surfing, and I think I've got to commit to come with you guys once. At least.
It'd be lovely.
That would be awesome.
Thanks,
guys.